The cold December wind cut through his thin jacket like a knife. He stood there on the sidewalk, just outside the tall glass doors of the Grand Royal Hotel, watching the golden lights spill out onto the pavement. Inside, he could see people moving around in fancy clothes, holding glasses of wine, laughing at jokes he would never hear. His name was Raymond. And at 53 years old, he had nothing left in this world except the clothes on his back, and a memory that refused to let him go. He had not planned to come here tonight. In fact, he had spent most of the day sitting on his usual bench in the park, 3 blocks away. The one near the old fountain that stopped working years ago. That bench had become his home now. His bed, his living room, his entire world packed into 6 feet of wood and iron. But something had pulled him here tonight. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was the hunger twisting in his stomach. Or maybe it was the sound he had heard while walking past this building. A sound so familiar it made his heart stop. Piano music. Someone inside was playing a piano. And even from out here on the street, even through the thick glass and the noise of the city, he could hear it. The notes floated out like whispers from another life. A life he used to live. A life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. Raymond looked down at his hands. They were rough and cracked, the skin dry from months of sleeping outside. His fingernails were chipped. There was dirt under them that no amount of washing at public restrooms could remove. These hands did not look like they belonged to a pianist, but they were. Once upon a time, these same hands had danced across ivory keys in concert halls, filled with hundreds of people. These fingers had played music that made strangers cry. These palms had received standing ovations in cities he could barely remember now. That was 30 years ago, a different lifetime. Raymond had grown up poor. His family lived in a small apartment on the bad side of town. The kind of place where you could hear your neighbors arguing through the walls, and where the heat never worked properly in winter. His mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. His father left when Raymond was 7, and never came back. But there was one thing in that tiny apartment that changed everything. An old, upright piano that his grandmother had left behind when she passed away. It was out of tune and missing 2 keys. But to young Raymond, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He taught himself to play. Night after night, while his mother worked late shifts, he would sit at that piano and figure out the notes. He had no teacher, no books, no YouTube videos like kids have today, just his ears and his fingers and a burning desire to make something beautiful come out of that broken instrument. By the time he was 12, he could play songs that made his mother sit down and weep. By 16, a music teacher at his high school discovered him and nearly fell off her chair when she heard him play. She had never seen natural talent like this, not in 20 years of teaching. She helped him apply for a scholarship to a music conservatory. The day he got accepted was the happiest day of his mother's life. She cried for an hour straight, holding the letter in her shaking hands, saying over and over again that her boy was going to be somebody. And he was. For a while. Raymond graduated at the top of his class. He won competitions. He performed at concert halls across the country. Critics called him a rare talent. A pianist who played not just with skill, but with soul. His future seemed brighter than the stage lights that shone on him every night. Then he met her. A woman with kind eyes and a laugh that sounded like music itself. They fell in love fast and hard, the way young people do when they think they have all the time in the world. They got married in a small ceremony with just a few friends. They moved into a little house with a garden where she grew tomatoes and he practiced piano in the living room. Those were the golden years. The years Raymond would give anything to have back. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning. She had been feeling tired for weeks, but they both thought it was just stress. Then came the headaches. Then the doctor visits. Then the diagnosis that turned their world upside down. Cancer. Stage 3. The doctors said they caught it late. Raymond stopped performing. He canceled every concert, every tour, every opportunity that came his way. None of it mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered was her. He spent every day by her side, holding her hand, playing soft melodies on a small keyboard he brought into her hospital room. The medical bills piled up faster than he could count. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Never enough. He sold the house. He sold his piano, the beautiful grand piano he had saved for years to buy. He sold everything they owned until there was nothing left to sell. She passed away on a rainy evening in March. She was 46 years old. Raymond held her hand until the very end. And when she took her last breath, something inside him broke, something that would never fully heal. After the funeral, he discovered the true weight of what they owed. The debt was crushing. Collectors called day and night. He tried to work, tried to pick up the pieces, but the grief was too heavy. He could not focus, could not function, could not even look at a piano without seeing her face. He lost his apartment within 6 months, then his car, then his phone. One by one, the pieces of his life fell away until there was nothing left. He found himself on the streets with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of sleeping on benches. 3 years of eating at shelters when he could find one open. 3 years of being invisible to a world that walked past him every single day without a second glance. But through it all, Raymond never forgot who he was. Deep down, beneath the dirty clothes and the unkempt beard and the hollow look in his eyes, he was still a pianist. The music never left him. It lived in his bones, in his blood, in every beat of his tired heart. And tonight, standing outside the Grand Royal Hotel, with the cold wind biting at his face, he heard that piano music floating through the air. It was calling to him, pulling him towards something he could not explain. He watched through the glass as a young woman in a red dress finished playing a simple tune. The guests clapped politely, and she stepped away from the piano. The instrument sat there now, silent and waiting, its black surface gleaming under the chandelier lights. Raymond's fingers twitched at his side. He had not touched a piano in over 3 years. He did not even know if he still could. But something inside him was stirring. Something that had been asleep for a very long time. Before he could stop himself, before his mind could tell him all the reasons this was a terrible idea, Raymond pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. The warmth hit him first. Then the smell of expensive perfume and fancy food. Then the stares. One by one, the guests turned to look at him, their conversations dying in their throats. He did not belong here. Everyone in that room knew it. And yet, he kept walking. His eyes fixed on the piano in the corner. His heart pounding in his chest like a drum. Whatever happened next would change everything. The moment Raymond stepped through those glass doors, he felt like he had walked into another world. A world where everything was clean and bright and beautiful. A world where people smelled like expensive cologne instead of city streets. A world where he clearly did not belong. The lobby of the Grand Royal Hotel was the fanciest place he had seen in years. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The marble floor was so polished he could almost see his reflection in it. Waiters in crisp white shirts moved through the crowd carrying silver trays loaded with tiny foods he could not even name. And everywhere he looked, there were people dressed like they had stepped out of a magazine. Men in suits that probably cost more than he had earned in his best year. Women in glittering dresses with jewelry sparkling at their necks and wrists. Everyone was laughing and chatting and having the kind of evening that Raymond had almost forgotten existed. For just a moment, he stood there, frozen, taking it all in. The warmth of the room was already seeping into his bones, chasing away the December cold that had been his constant companion for 3 years. It felt so good. So impossibly good. But that moment did not last long. A woman near the entrance noticed him first. She was tall and thin, wearing a dark blue dress and a pearl necklace that probably cost more than a car. Her eyes swept over Raymond from head to toe, and her face twisted into an expression of pure disgust. She leaned toward the man standing next to her, her husband by the looks of it, and whispered something. Raymond could not hear the words, but he did not need to. The way she looked at him said everything. The whispers spread like fire through dry grass. One by one, the guests turned to stare at the strange man who had wandered into their elegant evening. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Raymond felt their eyes on him like physical weight. He knew what they saw. A homeless man in a worn-out jacket that was 2 sizes too big. Pants that were stained and frayed at the bottom. Shoes with holes in the soles that let in water every time it rained. A beard that had not been trimmed in months. Hair that was tangled and gray and desperately needed washing. He looked like exactly what he was. A man who had lost everything. A young woman in a red dress, the same one who had been playing the piano earlier, covered her mouth with her hand and giggled. The sound was sharp and cruel, and it cut through Raymond like a blade. "Oh my goodness," she said to her friends, not even bothering to keep her voice down. "Did someone leave the back door open? I think something wandered in from the alley." Her friends burst into laughter. One of them, a young man with slicked-back hair and a watch that glittered with diamonds, pulled out his phone and pointed it at Raymond. "This is going to get so many views," he said with a grin. "Homeless guy crashes fancy party." Classic content. Raymond felt his face burn with shame. His first instinct was to turn around and walk right back out into the cold. That was what they wanted, after all. That was what everyone in this room expected him to do. Disappear, go back to being invisible. Stop ruining their perfect evening with his presence. But then his eyes found the piano again. It sat in the corner of the room like an old friend waiting patiently for him. A Steinway grand piano, its black surface gleaming under the lights. Even from across the room, Raymond could tell it was a magnificent instrument. The kind of piano that concert halls dreamed of owning. The kind of piano he had played a lifetime ago. His feet kept moving forward. The crowd parted as he walked, not out of respect, but out of fear. People stepped back like he was carrying some kind of disease. A woman actually clutched her purse tighter against her chest, as if Raymond might snatch it and run. He barely noticed. All he could see was that piano. A heavy hand landed on his shoulder, stopping him in his tracks. Raymond turned to find a large man in a black suit staring down at him. Security. The man had arms like tree trunks, and a face that looked like it had never smiled once in its entire life. "Sir," the security guard said, his voice flat and cold. "This is a private event. You need to leave, now." Before Raymond could respond, another man appeared beside the guard. This one was shorter, older, wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit with a name tag that read, "Hotel Manager." His thin lips were pressed together in a tight line of disapproval. "I apologize to everyone for this disruption," the manager announced to the room, loud enough for all the guests to hear. "This individual will be removed immediately. Please continue enjoying your evening." A ripple of relieved laughter went through the crowd. The natural order was being restored. The intruder would be dealt with. Everything would go back to normal. The security guard tightened his grip on Raymond's shoulder and started to push him toward the door. "Wait," Raymond said, his voice coming out rough and quiet. He had not spoken to anyone in days, and the word felt strange in his mouth. "Please. I just want to play." The manager raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "The piano." Raymond nodded toward the instrument in the corner. "I just want to play one song. That is all I am asking. One song, and then I will leave. I promise." For a moment, nobody moved. Then the laughter started. It began with the young man who had been filming on his phone, a loud, mocking laugh that echoed through the grand lobby. Then his friends joined in, then the woman in the pearl necklace, then her husband. Within seconds, it seemed like half the room was laughing at Raymond. "Did you hear that?" someone shouted. "The bum wants to play piano. Maybe he can play us a song about dumpster diving. Someone get him a tip jar." The jokes flew through the air like arrows, each one finding its mark. Raymond stood there in the middle of it all, surrounded by laughter, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his entire life. The manager shook his head, an amused smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Sir, I do not know what kind of joke you think this is, but we have actual musicians scheduled to perform tonight, professional musicians. Now please, let security escort you out before this becomes any more embarrassing for everyone." Raymond looked around the room at all the faces laughing at him. He saw the phones pointed in his direction, recording every humiliating second. He saw the disgust and the pity and the cruel amusement in their eyes. They had already decided who he was. A crazy homeless man who had wandered into the wrong place. A joke. A nobody. A nothing. 3 years ago, he might have believed them. 3 years of sleeping on benches and eating from shelters, and being ignored by every person who walked past him, had almost convinced Raymond that maybe they were right. Maybe he was nothing. But then, he remembered her face. His wife. The way she used to look at him when he played. The way her eyes would light up like she was witnessing something magical. She had believed in him until her very last breath. She had made him promise to never stop playing. He had broken that promise. For 3 long years, he had broken it. Not tonight. Raymond straightened his back. He looked the manager directly in the eyes. And when he spoke, his voice was steady and clear. "One song," he said. "That is all I ask. If I cannot play, you can throw me out and I will never come back. But if you do not let me try, you will never know what you missed." The room fell silent. The laughter faded. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. And somewhere in the back of the crowd, a man in an expensive suit was watching with curious eyes. A man who had no idea that the next few minutes would change his life forever. Just as much as they would change Raymond's. The silence in that room was heavy. It pressed down on everyone like a thick blanket, making even the smallest sounds feel impossibly loud. Raymond could hear his own heartbeat thumping in his ears. He could hear the soft clink of ice in someone's glass. He could hear the faint hum of the heating system somewhere above him. The hotel manager opened his mouth to speak, probably to order security to drag Raymond out once and for all. But before he could say a single word, a voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Wait." Everyone turned to look. The crowd parted slightly, and a man stepped forward from the back of the room. He was tall and broad-shouldered, somewhere in his mid-40s, with silver streaks running through his dark hair. His suit was charcoal gray and fit him perfectly, the kind of suit that was made by hand and cost more than most people earned in a month. Raymond recognized the type immediately. This was a man who was used to being in charge. A man who gave orders and expected them to be followed without question. A man who probably owned half the buildings on this block. The manager's entire demeanor changed in an instant. His annoyed expression melted into something that looked almost like fear. "Mr. Thornton," he said quickly, his voice suddenly much softer and more polite. "I apologize for this disturbance. We are handling it right now. Please, do not let this ruin your evening." So that was his name. Thornton. Raymond had never heard it before. But from the way everyone in the room was looking at this man, it was clear he was someone important. Someone powerful. Someone whose opinion mattered more than anyone else's in this building. Thornton held up a hand, and the manager immediately stopped talking. Then those sharp eyes turned to Raymond, studying him with an expression that was impossible to read. It was not disgust like the others. It was not pity either. It was something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or amusement. "You want to play the piano," Thornton said. It was not a question. Raymond nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. Just one song. That is all." Thornton tilted his head slightly, like a cat watching a mouse. A small smile played at the corner of his lips, but there was no warmth in it. "You know," he said, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, "I host this charity gala every year. Every single year. The same thing happens. The same boring conversations. The same boring music. The same boring people pretending to care about causes they will forget about by tomorrow morning." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. No one was quite sure if they were supposed to find this funny or be offended by it. Thornton ignored them and kept his eyes fixed on Raymond. "But this," he continued, gesturing at the ragged man standing in the middle of his fancy party. "This is the most interesting thing that has happened at one of my events in a very long time." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. From inside, he withdrew a crisp $100 bill. He held it up so everyone could see it, the green paper catching the chandelier light. "Here is what I propose," Thornton said, walking slowly toward the piano. He placed the $100 bill on top of the instrument, right where everyone could see it. You say you can play? Fine. Prove it. Play us something. Anything you want. The young man with the diamond watch laughed out loud. This should be good, he said to his friends, already raising his phone to record. Thornton shot him a look that silenced him immediately. Then he turned back to Raymond. If you can actually play, Thornton continued. I mean really play. Not just bang on the keys like a child. Then this money is yours. And I will personally make sure you get a hot meal and a warm bed for the night. Maybe even a job, if you clean up well enough. Murmurs went through the crowd. Some people looked shocked. Others looked entertained, like they were watching a reality television show unfold in front of them. But, Thornton added, holding up one finger, if you waste my time, if you sit down at that piano and prove that you are exactly what everyone in this room thinks you are, then you leave. Quietly. Without making a scene. And you never set foot in this hotel again. Do we have a deal? Raymond looked at the $100 bill sitting on the piano. $100. 3 years ago, that amount would have meant nothing to him. He used to earn 10 times that for a single performance. But now, after everything he had been through, $100 might as well have been $1 million. It could buy him food for weeks. It could buy him a new pair of shoes, ones without holes in the soles. It could buy him a night in a cheap motel where he could take a hot shower and sleep in an actual bed. But that was not why he was here. Raymond looked up from the money and met Thornton's eyes. I do not want your money, he said quietly. The room went completely still. Even Thornton looked surprised. Excuse me, he said. I did not come here for money, Raymond repeated. His voice was stronger now, steadier. I came here because I heard music. Because I saw that piano through the window. Because for 3 years, I have not touched an instrument, and I miss it more than I can put into words. He paused, swallowing hard against the lump forming in his throat. I used to be somebody, he continued. A long time ago, before everything fell apart. I used to play for crowds bigger than this. People paid good money to hear me. Critics wrote about me in newspapers. I had a gift, and I threw it away because life got too hard, and I forgot who I was. The room was so quiet now that Raymond could hear his own breathing. No one was laughing anymore. No one was whispering cruel jokes. Every single person was listening. I do not need you to believe me, Raymond said, looking around at all the faces staring at him. I do not need your approval, or your pity, or your $100. I just need 5 minutes with that piano. 5 minutes to remember who I used to be. 5 minutes to keep a promise I made to someone I loved very much. His voice cracked on those last words, and he had to stop for a moment to collect himself. The memory of his wife's face flashed through his mind, the way she had looked at him in those final days, her hand weak in his, making him promise to never give up on his music. He had failed her. For 3 years, he had failed her. But not tonight. Thornton stared at Raymond for a long moment. Something in his expression had shifted. The amusement was gone, replaced by something that almost looked like respect. Well, Thornton said finally, stepping aside and gesturing toward the piano. I suppose you should show us what you can do then. Raymond's heart nearly stopped. He looked at the piano, sitting there waiting for him. The beautiful Steinway with its gleaming black surface and perfect white keys. It was only 20 feet away, but it felt like it was on the other side of the world. His legs felt weak as he started walking. The crowd parted for him again. But this time the feeling was different. The mockery had faded. The cruel laughter had died. Now, there was only curiosity, anticipation, a room full of strangers wondering if this ragged man could possibly be telling the truth. Raymond reached the piano and stood beside it for a moment, just looking at it. His reflection stared back at him from the polished surface. He barely recognized himself. The man in that reflection looked old and tired and broken, but his hands still remembered. He sat down on the bench, adjusting his position slightly. The leather was soft and cool beneath him. The keys stretched out before him like an old friend's smile. Raymond placed his fingers on the keys. They were trembling. He could feel every pair of eyes in the room fixed on him. He could feel their doubt, their skepticism, their certainty that he was about to humiliate himself. He closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw her face one more time. His wife, smiling at him the way she always did when he sat down to play, believing in him the way no one else ever had. "This is for you," he whispered, so softly that no one else could hear. Then he began to play. The first note was soft, so soft that the people at the back of the room had to lean forward just to hear it. It floated through the air like a single drop of rain falling into a still pond, creating ripples that spread outward in every direction. Then came the second note, and the third. And suddenly, the ripples became waves. Raymond's fingers moved across the keys like they had never forgotten. Like the 3 years of silence had never happened. Like his hands had just been waiting, patiently waiting, for this exact moment to come alive again. He was playing Chopin. The Ballade, No. 1-inch G minor. It was one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano. A 12-minute journey through every human emotion imaginable. Joy and sorrow, hope and despair, love and loss. It was the piece he had played at his very first major concert, 30 years ago, when he was just a young man with big dreams and the whole world ahead of him. It was also the last piece he had ever played for his wife. The music started gentle, almost hesitant, like someone trying to find their way through darkness. The melody was sad and beautiful at the same time, full of longing for something just out of reach. Raymond kept his eyes closed as he played, letting his fingers do the remembering while his mind drifted somewhere far away. He was not in the hotel anymore. He was back in that little house with the garden where his wife grew tomatoes. He was sitting at his piano in the living room while she curled up on the couch with a book, looking up every now and then just to watch him play. He could almost smell her perfume, almost hear her breathing, almost feel her presence beside him like she had never left. The music grew stronger. The soft notes became chords that filled the entire room, bouncing off the marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Raymond's hands moved faster now, dancing across the keys with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for someone who had not practiced in years. But this was not about practice. This was about something deeper, something that lived in his bones and his blood and the very center of his soul. The music was not coming from his fingers. It was coming from his heart. In the crowd, something was changing. The woman in the pearl necklace, the one who had looked at Raymond with such disgust when he first walked in, was standing completely still. Her champagne glass hung, forgotten, in her hand. Her eyes were fixed on the piano, and her lips were slightly parted, like she wanted to say something but could not find the words. The young man with the diamond watch had lowered his phone. He was no longer recording. He was no longer smirking. He was just standing there, staring at the homeless man who was creating sounds more beautiful than anything he had ever heard in his life. The girl in the red dress, the one who had laughed and made jokes about the alley, had tears forming in the corners of her eyes. She did not even notice them at first. She was too lost in the music to feel them rolling slowly down her cheeks. Even Thornton, the powerful man who had made the wager, was affected. He stood near the piano with his arms crossed over his chest, but his expression had completely transformed. The amusement was gone. The skepticism was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like awe. Raymond played on, unaware of the effect he was having. The music was building now, climbing higher and higher like a bird trying to reach the sun. The notes came faster and more urgent, tumbling over each other in a cascade of sound that filled every corner of the grand lobby. This was the part of the piece that separated the good pianists from the great ones. The technical difficulty was extreme. The speed required was almost inhuman. Most musicians spent years perfecting this section, and many never quite got it right. Raymond played it flawlessly. His fingers were a blur on the keys. The music poured out of him like water from a broken dam. Years of pain and grief and loneliness, transforming into something impossibly beautiful. Every night he had spent sleeping on that cold park bench. Every meal he had missed. Every person who had looked right through him like he did not exist. It was all there in the music, but somehow, instead of sounding bitter or angry, it sounded like hope. Like even after everything, there was still something worth living for. The piece reached its climax, a thundering crescendo that seemed to shake the very walls of the hotel. Raymond's whole body was moving with the music now, swaying back and forth on the bench, completely consumed by the sounds he was creating. For these few precious minutes, he was not a homeless man in tattered clothes. He was not a failure who had lost everything. He was exactly who he had always been, a pianist, an artist, a man with a gift that no amount of suffering could ever take away. Then, slowly, the music began to soften. The storm passed, and in its place came a gentle calm. The notes grew quieter, more tender. Like a lullaby sung to a sleeping child, Raymond's fingers slowed their frantic pace, finding peace in the final passages of the piece. He thought of his wife again. Not the sick version from the hospital, but the healthy one. The one with the bright smile and the musical laugh. The one who used to dance around their kitchen while he played, spinning in circles with her arms outstretched like she was trying to catch the notes out of the air. She would have loved this moment. She would have been so proud. The final notes hung in the air, soft and sweet, and full of a sadness that was somehow beautiful. Raymond held them as long as he could, not wanting the moment to end, not wanting to return to the cold reality of his life outside these walls. But all songs must end eventually. He lifted his fingers from the keys. The last note faded into silence. And then there was nothing. No applause. No gasps. No sound at all. Just complete and total silence. The kind that feels heavy and full. Like the air itself is holding its breath. Raymond opened his eyes slowly. For a moment, he had forgotten where he was. The bright lights of the chandelier blinded him, and he had to blink several times before the room came back into focus. What he saw made his heart stop. Every single person in that crowded lobby was staring at him. But they were not staring with disgust anymore. They were not laughing or whispering cruel jokes. They were frozen in place, their faces showing expressions he had not expected to see. The woman in pearls was openly crying, tears streaming down her face without any attempt to hide them. The young man with the watch looked like someone had just told him the meaning of life. The girl in the red dress had her hands pressed over her heart, her whole body trembling. And Thornton. The powerful, wealthy, important Mr. Thornton was standing there with his mouth slightly open, looking at Raymond like he was seeing a ghost. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Raymond did not know what to do. He did not know what to say. He just sat there on the piano bench, his hands resting in his lap, waiting for something to happen. Then, from somewhere in the back of the room, someone started to clap. It was a single pair of hands at first, the sound sharp and loud in the quiet room. Then another pair joined in. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire room had erupted into applause. People were cheering. People were crying. People were shouting things that Raymond could not even understand, because there was so much noise. The same crowd that had mocked him and laughed at him and wanted him thrown out onto the street was now giving him a standing ovation. Raymond sat at the piano, surrounded by the thunder of applause, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt tears rolling down his own weathered cheeks. He had kept his promise. She would have been so proud. Raymond did not know how long the applause lasted. It could have been 1 minute or 10. Time had lost all meaning in that grand hotel lobby. All he knew was the sound of hands clapping, voices cheering, and his own heart beating so hard he thought it might burst right out of his chest. People were pushing forward now, trying to get closer to him. The same crowd that had wanted him thrown out on the street was now fighting to shake his hand. The woman in the pearl necklace reached him first, grabbing both his hands in hers, her mascara running down her face in black rivers. "I am so sorry," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I am so terribly sorry for how I looked at you. I had no idea." None of us had any idea. Raymond did not know what to say. He just nodded, still too overwhelmed to form proper words. More people crowded around him. The young man with the diamond watch pushed through, his face completely changed from the arrogant smirk he had worn earlier. He looked embarrassed now, ashamed even. "That was incredible," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I have never heard anything like that in my life. I feel like such a fool for the things I said earlier. Can you ever forgive me?" The girl in the red dress was next. She could barely speak through her tears. "You made me feel things I did not even know I could feel," she whispered. "Thank you. Thank you so much." One by one, they came. Strangers who had judged him without knowing a single thing about his life. Strangers who had laughed at his appearance and assumed he was worthless. Now they were lining up to apologize, to compliment him, to tell him how his music had touched something deep inside them. Raymond accepted each apology with grace. He held no anger toward these people. How could he? They had done what humans always do. They had looked at his outside and made assumptions about his inside. It was wrong, but it was also understandable. He had been invisible for so long that he had almost started to believe their assumptions himself, but not anymore. The crowd eventually parted, and Thornton stepped forward. The powerful businessman looked different now. The cool confidence was still there, but underneath it was something Raymond had not expected to see. Humility. Thornton reached into his jacket and pulled out the $100 bill he had placed on the piano earlier. He held it out toward Raymond. "You earned this," he said simply. Raymond shook his head. "I told you, I did not come here for money." Thornton smiled, and this time, there was real warmth in it. "I know you did not. That is exactly why you deserve it." He pressed the bill into Raymond's hand and closed his fingers around it. "But this is not why I wanted to speak with you." Why? He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small white card. A business card. He handed it to Raymond, who looked down at it with confusion. "I own a concert hall downtown," Thornton explained. "The Thornton Center for Performing Arts. You may have heard of it." Raymond had heard of it. Everyone had heard of it. It was one of the most famous concert venues in the entire country. The greatest musicians in the world had performed on that stage. "I want you to play there," Thornton continued. "A full concert. Proper tickets. Proper audience. Proper everything. We will handle all the arrangements. All you have to do is show up and do exactly what you did tonight." Raymond stared at him, unable to believe what he was hearing. "You want me to perform? At your concert hall?" "I do not just want it," Thornton said. "I insist on it. What I heard tonight was not just good, it was extraordinary. And the world deserves to hear it." The crowd around them murmured in agreement. Someone shouted that they would buy tickets right now if they could. Someone else said they would pay any price to hear Raymond play again. Raymond looked down at the business card in his trembling hand. His vision blurred with fresh tears. 3 hours ago, he had been sitting on a cold park bench, wondering if he would survive another winter on the streets. Now he was being offered the chance of a lifetime by one of the wealthiest men in the city. It did not feel real. None of it felt real. "There is one more thing," Thornton added quietly, so only Raymond could hear. "I have connections. Lawyers, accountants. People who help others get back on their feet. Whatever debt you have, whatever mess your life has become, we can figure it out together. Everyone deserves a second chance, especially someone with a gift like yours." Raymond could not hold back anymore. The tears flowed freely down his face, dripping onto his worn jacket. He tried to speak, but the words got stuck in his throat. All he could do was nod. Thornton put a hand on his shoulder and squeezed gently. "Welcome back," he said. The next 6 months changed everything. Thornton kept every promise he made that night. He connected Raymond with people who helped him sort out his debts, his paperwork, his entire life. He paid for Raymond to stay in a small apartment while he got back on his feet. He arranged for a doctor to check on his health and a barber to clean up his appearance. But most importantly, he gave Raymond access to a piano. Every single day, Raymond practiced. His fingers remembered more and more with each passing week. The rust fell away, and underneath it, his true ability began to shine again. The gift had never left him. It had just been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up. The night of the concert arrived on a warm evening in June. Raymond stood backstage at the Thornton Center. wearing a brand new suit that fit him perfectly. His hair was neatly trimmed. His beard was gone. He looked like a completely different person from the ragged man who had stumbled into that hotel lobby 6 months ago, but inside, he was still the same. Still the boy who had taught himself piano on a broken instrument in a tiny apartment. Still the young man who had fallen in love with a woman who believed in him more than he believed in himself. Still the husband who had held his wife's hand until her very last breath. Still Raymond. A stagehand appeared beside him. 2 minutes, sir, she said with a smile. The house is completely full. They are saying people are standing in the back because there were not enough seats. Raymond nodded, his heart pounding. He peeked through the curtain at the massive audience waiting for him. Thousands of faces, all turned toward the empty stage, all waiting for him. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. And in that quiet moment, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Her presence. It was like she was standing right beside him, just like she used to before every performance. He could almost hear her voice whispering in his ear. "You are going to be wonderful," she would always say. "You are always wonderful." Raymond smiled through his tears. "This is for you," he whispered into the empty air. "Everything I do from now on is for you." Then he walked out onto that stage, sat down at the grand piano, and began to play. The concert was a sensation. Critics called it one of the greatest comeback performances in musical history. Videos of Raymond playing spread across the internet and were viewed millions of times. His story inspired people all around the world, but Raymond did not care about fame or fortune. He cared about only one thing. Over the next few years, he donated nearly every penny he earned to organizations that helped homeless people get back on their feet. He visited shelters personally, sharing his story with people who had given up hope. He sat with them on benches just like the one he used to sleep on, and he told them the truth. "You are not invisible," he would say. "You are not worthless. You have something inside you that the world needs to see. Never let anyone make you believe otherwise." And every night, no matter how tired he was, no matter how many concerts he had played or interviews he had given, Raymond would sit at his piano in his small apartment and play one last song before bed. Always the same song. Chopin's Ballade, No. 1-inch G minor. The first song he ever played on a big stage. The last song he ever played for his wife. And somewhere, he knew she was listening, still believing in him, just like she always had.